afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our senior forum. I would like to first of all thank the sponsors of this event, the Brookline Board of Selectmen, the Economic Development Advisory Board, the Council of Aging, the Advisory Council on Public Health, and the Brookline Community Aging Network. We are witnessing a significant dynamic that's occurring in terms of the distribution of population by age. With the advent of the baby boomers moving into the 65 age cohort and improvements of health care, we're seeing a dynamic change. The 65 plus population over the next 10 years is expected to rise 30%, and by 2020 it's going to rise almost 78%. So we have a real issue to deal with in Brookline and throughout the country. There are many approaches that we're going to talk about today. One of them is they're both approaches to keeping people in their homes, but for situations where being able to stay in your home is not possible. We're going to discuss a variety of models ranging from lifestyle choices to need-based approaches with light services to extensive services, from rental approaches to ownership approaches to buy-in models. And you're going to hear from a variety of speakers who are going to discuss these models. We have a really difficult planning problem to deal with. If we want to ensure long-term members of this community to be able to stay in place, we have to make sure that we have sufficient alternatives as folks age in Brookline. So our planning problem is really how do we be proactive as a community? Given that we have little developable land, of that developable land it's very expensive, and zoning bylaws that are a challenge to navigate for the type of products that folks are going to talk about today. Today we're really lucky to have an experienced group of speakers. They're going to be speaking for about 10 minutes apiece, and if you read their biographies, I could go on for 10 minutes for each of them. We're going to run the gamut of models, and Judy Allen, for our speakers, is going to be the timekeeper, and we're going to give you a very icy stares for those of you who fail to comply with the 10 minutes. I'd like the audience to hold their questions until the end so we make sure we get all the speakers out there. Now I'd like to begin with Frank Caro. He's a sociologist who is Professor Emeritus of Gerontology at UMass Boston and the former director of the Gerontology Institute there. He's a founder of the Brookline Community Aging Network and serves as co-chair of the steering committee. He's a long-term town meeting member and former advisory committee member, and he's going to set some context for us. Frank.
Thanks, Mike, for that introduction. I want to thank all, as one of the organizers of this event, I want to thank all of you for coming. I also want to recognize Fran Price and Judy Allen for the excellent work they did in putting this event together. As one of the founders of the Brookline Community Aging Network, I want to say if you're not already a member, I urge you to join. We have pamphlets at the door. We really need everybody to get involved. I want to just say my kind of role in this is to say a little bit about the demographic context, and I want to do that very quickly. We've got so many people on the panel that that there just isn't time to do everything thoroughly. I want to kind of recognize these slides that I'm going to go through come from many sources. Some of them come from the work of the Brookline Community Foundation, and Linda Pelkey did some of the work on it, and some of them come from my colleague at UMass Boston, Jan Mutchler. This first slide just shows age distribution, and I think for those of you for the back, you can't really see it very well, but the point of this slide is that kind of by and large the age distribution in Brookline looks pretty much like it does elsewhere in the state, except we've got a peculiarity in Brookline that we have a kind of a bulge among the people in their 20s and 30s. Actually, in terms of numbers of older people, we're currently a little bit below the state average. Next slide, please. But when you look at the next slide, you really see what we have ahead of us. Now, everything you hear in Brookline, we're all concerned about the enormous growth in numbers of school-age kids, but that doesn't really show up on this slide. What really shows up, the group that is really growing extremely rapidly in numbers, is the aging baby boomers, those who are between 45 and 59 years of age. That group in the past decade has grown by 40%. Next slide, please. And what's happening in Brookline is not unique. The same thing is happening all over the state, at least with respect to that cohort. So we're not talking about just what's going on in Brookline, but we're talking about what's happening throughout the state and throughout the region. And what we can expect actually is people in that cohort looking at Brookline as a great place to live. Next slide. This slide gives us a picture of what is happening in the state over the next 20-year period. What this slide shows is the population 55 years of age and older. And you see over that period from 2010 to 2030, this is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the total population. That part that is over 55 represents 25% of the state population currently. By 2030, it's going to represent a third of the population, so 1 out of 3 people. And what we're going to see over the next 10 years is that little group growing particularly rapidly. And then in the latter part of the period, we're going to see the very oldest group growing in numbers. And that's one of the things that we have to think about in terms of projecting forward about our housing needs, is that kind of more immediately there is going to be increased demand for people who are in pretty good shape, who have a continued ability to live independently. And then looking farther ahead, we're going to have a particular need to look for housing options to serve those who need more support. Next slide, please. This is a picture of where it is that people are who are over 65 years of age in Brookline, and it's in the kind of the north part of what you see, which is actually a little bit hard to see this, is you say, well, these are people who are pretty much in the parts of town that are kind of more supportive of older people, in the sense there's higher density, closer to services, closer to public transportation, but then you also see that there are quite a few older people in South Brookline where the services are not so good, and where more challenging for older people to live. Next slide, please. And this shows pretty much the same thing. Next slide, please. I want to just say a few things about kind of household characteristics. In Massachusetts, the point of this is to say that the vast majority of older people live independently in their own household. There are only 6% who live in group quarters, and that's mostly nursing homes. But as people grow older, they tend to lose their spouses. Of those who are 75 and older, 60% live alone, and they're increasingly likely to be women. So 75% of the seniors who live alone are women. Next slide, please. The types of housing people tend to occupy as they grow older also changes. In the younger age groups, the vast majority are homeowners, but by the time people get to the age 85, they're much more likely to become renters. Next slide, please. And one of the other things we need to be aware of is that there's a lot of economic diversity among older people in their capacity to pay for housing. And the way this unfolds, is kind of one way of looking at it is the portion of people's income is spent for housing, and see particularly among renters, that a very high proportion of them are paying relatively more of their income for housing, which means that it's a pretty good indicator that they're having a tough time and spending disproportionately for housing. So then as we go forward in this discussion this afternoon, we really have to be paying attention both to opportunities for those who bring a good deal of financial resources to the picture, and those who need subsidies. So that's just a little bit of background for what's coming ahead. Thank you.
Just one thing to add to the context of thank you. One thing to add to the context of Frank's presentation in terms of the available senior housing here. We have basically within the Brookline Housing Authority has 6 buildings for low-income seniors, a little over 400 units. Hebrew Senior Life has 3 buildings for approximately 700 units for mixed income communities. We also have 2 assisted living facilities totaling 163 units. And beyond that, we have what we call a lot of natural occurring retirement communities, basically a lot of condos, a lot of them located within Coolidge Corner, where there's a high proportion of seniors living. Next, I'd like to introduce Amy Scheckman, who is President and CEO of Jewish Community Housing for the Elderly. Amy has 30 years of professional experience in the urban planning field with a focus on affordable housing both in the nonprofit and public sectors. Prior to joining JCHE, Amy served as Associate Director of Public Housing and Rental Assistance for the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development, and there she led the state's effort to leverage, attract new funding to preserve and restore public housing. Before coming to DHCD, she was Vice President at Hebrew Senior Life, involved in permitting the large Newbridge on the Charles Continuing Retirement Community. And she also served, as everyone knows, for 8 years as the first Economic Development Officer in Brookline. Amy is going to speak somewhat about what JCHE does, but also going to provide a context about some of the different models and the challenges of doing affordable senior housing. Amy?
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me here. So, as Mike said, when we looked at all the speakers last night, we decided to narrow down what I talk about JCHE and more on the broader, which I just, as a caveat, it's not that I don't believe deeply in what we do, I just thought it'd be more fun and more efficient. So, and also I want to be honest up front and maybe a little controversial. I have a point of view, and I'm not going to hide it. So we talk about all these demographic bulges, and it's as if this creation of all these more people who are seniors, which we did through better medical care, better housing, better supports, is somehow this massive thing coming at us, and we don't have an ability to deal with it, or we don't know what to do with it. I have a point of view that congregate housing with supports, the kind of housing we do, creates an infinitely better quality of life. It is by far the most efficient public policy to ever have. And yet, the world out there, the nomenclature and everything that's going on is encouraging people really against moving into the kind of housing we have. And so I'm going to take that on a little bit and have some fun. Just a few pictures. We can flip through them. Golda Meir House, Shulman House, Coleman House, some of the amenities we have at all of our facilities and what it looks like to live there. So I think you all know the different types you could live in. So those, we can just move right on along to the different things we can do. I wanted to give you a sense of the cost of living in them because it's really, really expensive for the most part if it's a non-subsidized place. You know, it can range from $500 a day for a nursing home care, most of which is paid by Medicaid. And if it's got specialty and dementia, it's even more. Assisted living is extraordinarily expensive, usually $5,000 to $8,000 a month. More for dementia. The CCRCs, continuing retirement communities, not only have an upfront cost, they have a very high monthly cost. If you're talking about just private home care, that's also expensive, and of course, adult day health. Those are the kind of costs. So I'm going to focus a minute on senior housing. There's kinds that either restricts you by age. It can start at 55. Ours just starts at 62. Some, that's all it is. It only restricts age. Then you've got the income restricted. And oddly, what that means is there's maximum incomes, not minimum incomes. The properties that we have are maximum incomes because they have subsidies with them. And there's two ways those subsidies play out. Either people have variable rents depending on their income. In other words, if you earn $100 and you pay 30% of your income rent, you pay $30. This person next door who owns $200 is going to pay $60. It's a variable rent based on your own income. If your income grows or if your income falls, your rent grows or falls. So that you're never paying more than 30%. And the government limits us to providing that for people who earn anywhere from up to 50% or 80% of area median income. Believe it or not, at every single one of our buildings, it's a different income limit depending on when it was bought, when we built it, and what the HUD restrictions were at that time. But in reality, 95% of our folks are earning less than 30% of area median. That's the lowest income category there is. And so variable rents are really good for that population because they have very, very little money, and if we can keep their rent low, they can actually live decently. The average income in our Brighton property is $10,000 a year per household, and they can live a decent life if they live with us because they're only paying 30%. Then the newer government programs have us fixing the rent. They fix it at an amount they imagine someone earning 60% of area median could pay 30% of their income. But if you earn less, that rent does not change. It's a good deal. It's much better than non-subsidized. For us, it's an average of about $1,000 a month rent when you compare that to market rent or some of those costs I saw there. Obviously a good deal, but it doesn't give us any flexibility to change the rent. And then the other piece to be sort of always alert to is some housing is service plus and some is housing only. We are very deep believers in the services plus model because when people come to us, we want to keep them. We want to keep them for their whole lives. We consider it our failure if we have to turn someone over to a nursing home or assisted living or any other kind. So those services become the critical piece that allow that to happen in reality. Oh, that's a really bad picture. That looks great on my computer, but this is, it's got all these colors that aren't coming out. But this is the exterior of the new building we just built a year and a half ago in Framingham. This is our first mixed income model where we actually tried to do is 50 units are those variable rent, very deeply subsidized. 40 units are those modestly subsidized, fixed lower rents. And then we have market units, but because we are a nonprofit, we made a commitment to make the market rents much lower than what's in the market. So for example, rents at our place start at $2,400 a month, but that includes 2 meals a day and all the programs and services that we'll talk about briefly, and all your utilities. So it's actually pretty much affordable for most people who don't qualify. It's another picture that looked great on my computer, not so much here. Just quick overview, we have 1,200 apartments in 6 buildings. We don't have any in Brookline, but maybe after today some people will work with me so we can fix that problem. All but 123 of ours are the deeply subsidized kind, and 63 have the low rents, and then the market rents I mentioned. We have a very service-intensive model. We have 12 resident service coordinators who are social workers working in our building. 90% of our residents have regular, almost daily, but definitely weekly contact with our resident service coordinators, who are the gatekeepers to a range of services and programs to get people what they need when they need it. If you're in our housing, the only way we can do the kind of intensive services is we raise over $1 million a year in private philanthropy and reinvest that right back every year into our programs and services with great return for society. Next. This is what I really want to talk about, the impact. How do we know it's working, and why do I have the nerve to say I have a point of view that this is a much better way for people to spend their senior years, but I'm losing it. The impact. Okay, so quickly, longer lives. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services found that people who live in congregate settings with the kind of support services we provide on average live 5 years longer than people who don't. I think that's significant. Avoiding or postponing nursing home care. MetLife did a study, and actually HUD did a study, and the average, most people don't end their lives in nursing homes. So I'm not talking about everybody, but for the people who do end their lives in nursing homes, the average age of entry is 79. If you live at JCHE housing and you need to end your life in a nursing home, and remember only 3% do, meaning 97% don't, but if you do end your life in a nursing home, the average age you will enter is 88.25. That's 9.25 years of avoided nursing home care. Now to give you an idea, the government, if we get someone and we provide the whole range of services, home care in their apartment, blah, 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 all this stuff, at most, the government's subsidizing that person $15,000 a year. If they go to that nursing home, they're subsidizing them at $105,000 a year. Okay, all of that difference is incredible amounts of money off the Medicaid budget, which we're all freaking out about because of the numbers, right? And I have never ever met anyone who has said, gee, I wish instead I could go to a nursing home. I really don't want to live in this nice housing. So we have this opportunity for both quality of life and saving government money. And that's 9.25 years. That's extraordinarily significant. Even better, and I don't yet have these statistics, we'll have them soon, for the 88.25 is an average, which means, of course, half the people go older, half the people go younger. Almost all the people on the upper end of that average, over 80, came to us in their 70s or early 80s. 70s, I'm sorry. The people who are on the younger end all came to us later. So not only is it good to come to us, the earlier you come to us, the more likely you'll never be in a nursing home, or if you do, you'll go much later. It's very significant. There are so many studies, I'm not going to read them all because they're going to keep telling me I have to shut up, so I will. But let me just do one. Harvard School of Public Health last year came out with a study that showed for people who get dementia, some of the many forms, the rate of decline, cognitive decline, if you're living in a setting where there's daily social interaction, is less than half the rate of cognitive decline than if you're living on your own. Okay? 50% lower. So in other words, I mean, the things people are most afraid of, right, are dying, going to nursing homes, and dementia, losing their minds. We have very, very significant statistics to show that these things change dramatically if you live in a place that, like, we and some of us are able to provide. Quickly, volunteerism, 25% of our residents are volunteering. We have a bus goes twice a week to a Dorchester Trouble school. We have 20 different kind of volunteer programs, and most of our residents volunteer. That's a boost to the economy, the local economy. We do things with our resident service coordinators, help people protect their own private income if, somebody says they're, big companies say, I'm not giving you your annuity anymore, we get that back. And the efficiency of service, just quickly, if you pay a home care worker to come to our buildings, you're paying 8 hours and you're getting 8 hours of service. If they're going to single family homes around, you're getting 5.5 hours of service. But, of course, we're making it almost impossible to build this. You can see when we built our other ones, there was one store, you got a grant, you built it, you subsidized it, you moved on. Now, the last one we built, you actually can't see the last one. There are 17 separate sources of financing with 17 separate reporting mechanisms. We almost have to have a full-time person just to do the reports for those things. We got to be able to do better than that. Don't have time to really go into this, but you can see the way we provide the services is all these different mechanisms. Properties pay a little bit of fee, tenants pay very small fees, like $20 a year, $25 a year, sorry. We get donations, we get foundations, we sell some of our kosher home delivered meals and make a little bit of a margin to provide food for some of our people who can't pay. We have direct programs that we get from the government, and then we do all these kind of services, the computer centers, fitness, wellness, intergenerational, we have our own van to take people around, translation, because we're very culturally competent to make sure all the languages have programs in their own language, dining, housekeeping, and Care Choices, which is home care in addition to the regular home care. Okay, let's quickly go through the last one or two. Pictures, keep going, just pictures. I think you all know that. The hope, I think, is if we can figure out how to get money out of the Affordable Care Act for all the Medicaid dollars we avoid, that will be hopeful. And next, you know that, next. For Brookline, CCRs used to take a lot of land. I don't know if we have it. I'm not gonna read you those. I think, so think about it, because I think not only will it be good for the people who live here, we pay property taxes everywhere we go. We pay significant property taxes. It gives you a chance to retain the people who live their lives here, people whose children live here and want their parents nearby. They're shoppers, they're diners, they can add to the local economy and do an enormous amount of volunteer work. And thank you very much, because I see the zero.
Thank you, Amy. Amy is really skilled at putting 25 minutes of presentation into 10, and I wish I could do that. The next speaker is Jim Coughlin, who is the CEO of the Northbridge Companies. Jim brings 20 years of experience in senior housing in his role as founder and chief executive officer with his company. Previously, he served as a partner and senior executive with a prominent New England-based senior housing company. His focus has been on financing and structuring of new development projects and the acquisition of existing assets, which resulted in 27 asset senior housing portfolio. He's facilitated the financing, development, acquisition, disposition, and recapitalization of $180 million of assets. Under his direction, the company currently owns and manages 8 facilities with a total of 739 units, plus another 299 units under development in 4 facilities. Jim?
Thanks, Mike. Thank you for having me this afternoon. My name is Jim Coughlin, and my partner Wendy and I founded the Northbridge Companies 8 years ago because we really found an opportunity to develop the next generation of senior housing. I share Amy's enthusiasm that the social model of senior housing really makes a difference in the lives of seniors in today's market. One of the things that we also found that being a local provider, it really enabled us to take advantage of our local market knowledge of the needs that were there, and also partner with the local communities that were in need of senior housing. So as Amy pointed out, assisted living fits in between senior independent living and nursing homes. And what we are providing is both housing, hospitality services, and supportive services referred to as activities of daily living, which would include help with bathing, dressing, meal preparation, and the likes. Each of our communities has a private apartment, common amenities, provide services such as dining and activities, housekeeping, and maintenance. And one thing that's very exciting for us is the level of service that we're now bringing into our communities. We have such programs as brain gyms that provide unique programs and games for people to play games on computers that enable them to enhance their cognitive abilities. And then, of course, the personal care aspect of it. What does it cost? Our model is a private pay model. We do accept group adult foster care, which is a state-run program that provides subsidy for assisted living residents. But we've also, in many of our communities, partnered with the local community and created special scholarship programs or affordable programs as part of the permitting process. As an example, we recently developed a 110-unit facility in the town of Burlington, Massachusetts, where we actually created a affordable program in partnership with the local housing authority, where they manage and create a preferential list for Burlington residents. And we've created 10 unique settings for Burlington residents. We also have been utilizing the veteran benefit, which is aid and attendance, yet again, another way of trying to create affordability. And I think you'll hear from all of us, I think this is a major issue that we're all addressing in some way or form or function. Our customer is typically an 83-year-old female. That is our target market. The good news is that as we are moving away from catering to the war generation and more of the baby boomers, there is a higher propensity. We've seen in our portfolio more men going from about 3% to 10%. That's all good news for the men in the room. In addition, we're seeing a lot more couples come into an assisted living setting. And I think one of the things that we have found is that we are solving a healthcare need, and it's not just for the residents, but also for their families. So we are, helping families, neighbors, and the service providers. We're all part of this partnership together. What have we found in new and innovative in senior housing? As I alluded to before, it's one thing to develop a wonderful, beautiful building, but this isn't a real estate business. This is healthcare and all about programming and social services. One of the things that we've developed is the Eat Fresh, Eat Local program, where we're actually partnering with local food growers, bringing in unique food, seasonal menus, and it's been a great response from our residents, because as a local provider, we have the ability to be very specialized as opposed to our national competitors that are buying the majority of their food from Sysco and the larger food purveyors. The STAR program references the sharp thinking, active residents. Again, what can we do? Art therapy, socialization, to Amy's point, having our residents volunteer. We have choral groups. It's pretty amazing. And then we are seeing, as again, the parents of the baby boomers more focus on green initiatives in all of our communities. It's just a picture of, this is the lobby of our most recent development that we just developed in Needham, Massachusetts, and it's a dedicated 62-unit dementia care facility. What was fascinating about this community is that we were able to provide specialized training to our associates and really bring on some very unique programming to cater to families that were wrestling with their loved ones having dementia or related or Alzheimer's. Again, just another example of this, our Stonebridge facility in Burlington, Massachusetts. Certainly not the real estate that we were using or developing 20 odd years ago when we were catering to more war generations. Many of our residents love to have their own dedicated pub in their communities, and this is something that gets a lot of use. So when we look at an opportunity, we're really catering to looking at a 10-mile radius. 60% of our residents that will move into a community are coming from the communities that we're actually developing in. The other 40% are really moving to be near their adult children. They may be in the Sun Belt, have lost a spouse, and now that they're at risk or in need of additional services, they tend to want to come home closer to where either they grew up or where their adult children are. What would a potential project look like in Brookline? I think what makes Northbridge unique is that we do not have a cookie cutter model. We're really trying to understand the needs of the community and also really determine the nuance and how it best fits into the community itself. Fran, if I could just ask you to go back to that last slide on previous one from that. So this is a perfect example. We were asked to acquire a site in Needham, Massachusetts that a developer had been fighting with the neighbors for 6.5 years. We came in, we worked with the neighbors, and the greatest antagonist, the neighbor across the street, was struggling because she didn't want to look at an institutional grade building. So we actually went in, designed a building so as you look down the driveway, it looked like a single family house. You wouldn't know that this building is actually a 50,000 square foot building that's actually built into a hill in the back. Again, another kind of public-private partnership. The town of Plymouth approached us. This nursing home had gone bankrupt, 188 units of skilled had gone bankrupt. The town was petrified of what the building was going to be turned into. We partnered with the town, converted it to an 85-unit assisted and Alzheimer's facility, and it's been a smashing success for both the community and us. So when we look at new opportunities, we establish a criteria, determine if there's a market for the community. We need to have a site that would accommodate 85 to 110 units. We enjoy access to public transportation, and No problem. And as we look at more urban settings, you may wonder why there aren't more options. And what you'll probably hear is that land costs, of course, are very expensive in Brookline, and senior housing typically is not the highest and best use from a valuation of land. So it really takes some creativity on behalf of the developer and the community to bring in a resource such as this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Our next speaker is Dorothy Kelly Gay. She is Vice President of Government Relations at Hebrew Senior Life. She's responsible for assisting HSL with legislative affairs and public policy at the local, state, and federal levels. Dorothy represents the organization in the community on legislative and other policy issues and by advocating for senior health care policies. She's a former mayor of Somerville, and she has served as Director of Senior Supportive Housing for Hebrew Senior Life from 2003 to the present. In addition to her career as a public servant, she has been a full-time working registered nurse and healthcare administrator for decades. She's the former administrative coordinator of nursing at Hebrew Rehabilitation Center, a position she held for 17 years until she was elected mayor. Dorothy.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as Mike just told you, I not only house them, I take care of them as well. So with my nursing background, but that's a little joke. As you see, we are located in Brookline. We are right here in Coolidge Corner, and we have 600 plus units of housing. Affordable housing, market rate housing, moderate, low, and very low income housing all combined. I am part of Hebrew Senior Life, and I'm very proud of what we've been able to do here in Brookline. And in 2002, we bought these buildings with the aid of Amy Scheckman, who was an official in the town at that time. We bought what is known as Central Communities of Brookline. And our aim as Hebrew Senior Life's mission is to provide quality housing for seniors and encourage them to age in place with supportive services. As you see, we have great resources being part of Hebrew Senior Life. Go on to the next. Hebrew Senior Life is built on healthcare, housing, research, and teaching. And that is our main campus in Roslindale. And these are part of our long-term care. We do not encourage our tenants towards long-term care. We can provide for them in our housing sites. We also have adult day health in Roslindale and also in Brighton. And this is one of our post-acute care units in Roslindale. Should any member of our housing, any of our tenants, have a need for post-acute or long-term care, they are part of the continuum and they have first choice at a bed. We're also affiliated with Harvard Teaching and the medical school, and we have a lot of the students from Harvard, especially in our Roslindale facility, come through. All the second year students come through and actually have an opportunity to see seniors and act with seniors. That is very unusual. Most medical schools, they graduate and they have never ever dealt with a senior. And our aging research is very helpful to us in our housing sites. And we use a lot of the research to do better things with our aging groups, and all of the conditions with helps with exercise and with our Alzheimer's and dementia residents. The new paradigm of senior care, as you can see, we're moving away from the nursing home, as everybody has already stated. Nobody wants to go to a nursing home, if at all possible. So our emphasis in today's world in our housing sites is on supportive housing. And as you see, it's the biggest. This is the Jack Satter House in Revere, which is totally HUD subsidized. And every apartment, the 266 apartments, have an ocean view. It is incredible. And this is our other totally subsidized HUD facility in Randolph, which has 168 apartments. our continuing care retirement community in Canton. And this is our newest Newbridge on the Charles. And that also has a healthcare center, 260-bed healthcare center as well. Our emphasis is on multi-generational, not only at Newbridge, but also in center communities of Brookline. And as you can see, can everybody read the? You can't, okay. We are put a lot of emphasis on improving technology because that improves quality of life and quality of care. And we are also serving the entire community, and we have living laboratories for research, and we are green, very green. And here we are in our favorite place of Coolidge Corner. We are on Center Street, and what turns a senior apartment building into HSL supportive housing? We have meals, 2 meals a day, transportation, personal care, housekeeping, education activities, care management, social services, 24-hour emergency response, and medical and healthcare services. That's what constitutes a community.